Welcome to What the F Happened, Fraud and Financial Crime Deconstructed, a Defend podcast where we break down what's actually happening across fraud, scams, AML, and financial crime.
Each episode cuts through the noise to explain the tactics, trends, and real-world impact behind the headlines, so you're better prepared for what comes next. Let's get into it. You know that feeling when you're, just trying to buy a coffee, or maybe you're rushing to snag a concert ticket online and suddenly your phone buzzes?
Oh yeah, the dreaded text message.
Right. You look down and it's an alert from your bank.
Yeah.
They've declined the charge. They've locked your card.
And you're just standing there.
Yeah, you're holding up the entire line, jumping through all these authentication hoops just to prove that, yes, it is actually you trying to spend your own money.
I mean, we've all been there. It's incredibly frustrating.
It really is. But
Yeah.
what if the minor inconvenience you just experienced is actually, the tiny visible tip of an incredibly massive invisible shadow war?
Because it is a war, and it operates on a scale that I think most people just can't even fathom.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're pulling from a really revealing dispatch from the front lines. We've got our hands on an April 2026 newsletter from DataVisor.
Right, and they are a company operating right at the bleeding edge of financial crime prevention.
Exactly. So the mission for our discussion today is to explore how the fight against financial crime is fundamentally shifting. We're moving away from looking at single isolated transactions.
Which is how it's always been done.
Yeah, but now the focus is entirely on mapping out these massive hidden criminal ecosystems. And we're going to look at how artificial intelligence is basically rewriting the rules of the game for everyone involved.
Because the core realization in the industry right now is that if you don't understand the broader ecosystem, you simply cannot see the crime.
Okay, let's unpack this. To understand this new era of fraud, we really have to look at why those old methods, just checking if a password is correct, are failing so spectacularly.
They're just not enough anymore.
No, they aren't. In the source material, DataVisor's co-founder and chief product officer, Feng Yu, gave a quote to PYM-NTS that really sets the stage. She said, the biggest shift in fraud prevention isn't detection, it's visibility across the ecosystem.
That's the crucial part, visibility.
Right. She actually points out that a lot of current vendor contracts don't even require behavioral data sharing in a way that supports real-time monitoring.
Though it does seem like new directions from NACHA, the organization that handles ACH payments, are starting to push the industry to close that gap.
Well, thank goodness, because that visibility gap is basically the entire ballgame, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's look at how modern fraud actually operates.
Yeah.
At the level of a single transaction, a modern fraudulent transfer looks completely legitimate.
So the data looks fine.
The data is impeccably clean. The device the person is using might not be flagged anywhere. The IP address checks out. The credentials are perfectly valid.
Wow.
Right, so if an analyst is just looking at that one transfer, there is zero reason to decline it. It's only when you step back and look at the network level, how that one seemingly normal transaction shares tiny hidden links with hundreds of other accounts that the coordinated attack surfaces.
Okay, so it's kind of like trying to solve a highly coordinated multi-state bank heist by only looking at a single receipt for the getaway car's gas.
That is exactly what it's like.
Because if you just look at the receipt, you say, well, someone bought $30 of unleaded fuel, nothing illegal about that. You completely miss the fact that 10 other people bought gas at the exact same time, driving the exact same routes.
And they're all converging on the exact same vault.
Exact.
That analogy hits the nail on the head.
Yeah.
And the source material actually gives us a stunning real-world example of this network effect in action. They feature this attack spotlight about a credit union.
Right. They're in the process of scaling up their digital banking services, right?
Yeah. They applied this network-level visibility stepping back to look at the whole map rather than just the single receipts, and they caught 94 coordinated fraud rings.
In just 5 weeks.
5 weeks, which is it's staggering. But what's really wild isn't just the timeline, it's the sheer density of what they found in that window. Just one of those 94 clusters was driving over 500 fraudulent transactions.
Oh, wow. So just by zooming out, what was the total impact?
Because they shifted their view to the network level, they prevented an estimated $5.3 million in annual fraud loss.
That is massive. And here's a detail that stood out to me. The newsletter notes they achieved an 80% reduction in manual reviews. I mean, I'm imagining a human analyst just staring at a spreadsheet of 500 clean-looking gas receipts,
Yeah, they're going to waste hours, maybe days, finding absolutely nothing.
which is so inefficient.
And that's exactly what the criminals are banking on. They design these operations specifically to stay below traditional detection thresholds.
So they know the limits.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A sophisticated fraud ring knows exactly what dollar amount or velocity triggers an alert on a single account. So
Yeah.
they diffuse the attack, they spread the activity out across hundreds of synthetic accounts.
It's basically death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Exactly. It's designed to exhaust human review teams.
Which completely explains why this is no longer just a headache for your local credit union. I mean, the sheer scale of these networks has completely caught the attention of Washington. We are seeing a massive pivot where this kind of fraud is now being treated as a literal national security threat.
It is a major escalation, honestly, in how the federal government views financial crime. The newsletter outlines some sweeping actions. On March 16, 2026, an executive order EO 14390 was issued specifically targeting transnational scam centers.
Yeah, the source mentions these centers fuel things like tech support fraud, romance scams, and pig butchering, which I've heard that term thrown around a lot lately. But what exactly is pig butchering? Because it sounds horrific.
The name is gruesome, yeah, but it actually describes the methodology perfectly. These are massive, usually overseas operations. Scammers will contact a victim, often starting with just an accidental text message, and then they spend months building a relationship.
So they're fattening up the pig, so to speak.
Exactly. Once trust is established, usually through a fake romance or a fake friendship, they introduce the victim to a fraudulent cryptocurrency investment platform.
Oh, no.
The victim sees fake returns, they invest their life savings, and then the scammers just vanish with everything.
That is devastating. Just devastating. And the newsletter notes that on the exact same day as that executive order, a second one was signed establishing a specialized task force to eliminate fraud.
Right.
This one is chaired by Vice President J.D. Vance, and its specific mandate is to target the exploitation of federal benefit programs. So, I mean, operationally, what does that actually mean for the bank trying to stop the money from moving?
It puts intense pressure on monitoring what are called mule accounts.
Okay, mule accounts.
Yeah, a mule account is basically the middleman in a money laundering ecosystem.
Yeah.
For a task force focused on benefits fraud, institutions now have to relentlessly monitor accounts that receive multiple government disbursements.
Oh, so if a single checking account is receiving, say, 5 different unemployment checks or Social Security deposits under 5 different names.
Right. That's a massive structural red flag that you are looking at a mule for an organized ring.
Exactly.
But the newsletter also highlights this really massive pivot in how the government wants banks to handle the victims themselves. There's this huge new focus on what they're calling unwittingly authorized fraud. And I'll be honest, I really want to push back on
This
this.
is a controversial topic.
Right, because how on earth does a bank stop a transaction when the customer is being socially engineered and actively wants to send the money?
Right.
I mean, if I log in, clear my two-factor authentication, and demand to wire $50,000 to my new romantic partner overseas, how does my bank stop me without treating me like a child?
That's a great point. This raises an important question, and it is arguably the hardest problem in fraud prevention right now. Historically, banks focus purely on unauthorized access. You know, someone hacking your password.
Sure, the traditional bad guy in a hoodie. Exactly. But now, the administration is pressuring institutions to intervene when the customer is the one eagerly pressing the send button. To do that, anti-money laundering, or AML teams, can't just look at credentials anymore. They have to integrate deep cyber intelligence.
Meaning they have to know who is on the other end of that wire transfer before I even hit send.
Precisely. The executive orders signal that federal agencies are going to be sharing hard intelligence directly with these bank AML teams. They're going to share specific foreign IP ranges or the exact crypto wallet addresses that are known to be controlled by these transnational scam hubs.
Okay, I see.
So you try to send that $50,000. The bank system doesn't just see a valid login. It sees that the destination wallet is on a federal watch list for a scam center. They block the transfer, even if you were screaming at them to let it through.
Which brings us to a fascinating contradiction in this deep dive. The banks are under immense pressure from the government to block these scam transfers and hunt down these massive fraud rings.
Very intense pressure.
But almost simultaneously, regulators are breathing down their necks, warning them that if they close the wrong accounts in their pursuit of fraud, they are going to face massive penalties. It's the debanking dilemma.
It is an incredibly precarious regulatory tightrope right now. Just 10 days after those executive orders, on March 26, 2026, the chairman of the FTC, Andrew Ferguson, sent high-profile warning letters to 4 major payment processors and card networks.
And the target of these letters was the practice of debanking. For you listening, this is when a financial institution terminates a customer's account based on their political, business, or religious views. The FTC is now claiming this may be classified as an unfair or deceptive act under Section 5 of the FTC Act.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it fundamentally changes how risk algorithms operate behind the scenes. In the past, if a bank's automated AI system flagged a business as high risk, maybe they sell products that are perfectly legal but generate a lot of chargebacks or controversy, the bank might just close the account.
Just to be safe.
Yeah, and they'd cite a vague term like reputational risk. It was a catch-all excuse to offload anything messy.
But the newsletter makes it clear that citing vague reputational risk is basically a target on your back now. Fraud teams need ironclad documented proof for every single closure.
Exactly. This forces compliance officers to fundamentally audit their own AI systems. They have to prove that their algorithms are separating actual financial risk from bias.
Wow.
They cannot let an automated system inadvertently penalize controversial but legal commerce, because the FTC is characterizing that kind of automated penalty as a potential violation of consumer rights.
So just to summarize this impossible tightrope for the listener, the government is saying, catch all the incredibly sophisticated hidden network fraud, block the pig butchering, but don't you dare let your automated high-risk algorithms accidentally penalize a legal business.
It's quite the mandate.
Oh, and the newsletter notes this isn't just for traditional banks. Fintechs, payment gateways, they're all under the same microscope now.
The cost and complexity of compliance just skyrocketed for every single entity that touches money.
Okay, so if traditional banks and major payment processors are locking down and regulators are watching every single account closure, where does this leave the criminals? Because, they aren't just retiring.
No, they never do. They migrate to the path of least resistance. The newsletter outlines 3 specific areas where the battlefield is expanding rapidly, and the first one is online marketplaces.
Okay, this part blew my mind. The newsletter explicitly states that fraud rings rarely debut their new tactics against banks. Instead, they use the fast-paced, low-friction world of online marketplaces to refine them.
Yes.
So wait, are criminals essentially running R&D departments on shopping apps before they attack Wall Street?
That is actually a very accurate way to look at it. Marketplaces prioritize a seamless user experience. They want you to click and buy instantly, which naturally means linear security friction.
Which makes sense for shopping.
Right, but that makes them perfect sandboxes for criminals to test their automated bots. The newsletter points out that to fight back, marketplaces shouldn't just rely on hard rejections. They need to use soft blocks.
Wait, what does a soft block actually look like? How does that stop a criminal?
A soft block is about making the fraud incredibly expensive and tedious to execute. Instead of just declining a suspicious login, the system might inject friction. It might throw up a complex CAPI-TCA.
Oh.
Or it might deliberately throttle the page load speed for that specific user. If a criminal is running an automated script trying to test 10,000 stolen credit cards, and suddenly every attempt takes 40 seconds and requires solving a puzzle.
Their bot burns through massive amounts of computing power.
Exactly. You ruin their return on investment.
That makes total sense. So if marketplaces are the low-friction sandbox where they perfect their tactics, what happens when they take those stealthy tactics to a higher friction, higher reward target?
That's where it gets scary.
Yeah, the newsletter points to life insurance. Specifically, account takeovers, or ATOs, of high-value policies. And I'm honestly confused by this. Why steal a life insurance policy? You can't exactly walk up to an ATM and withdraw a death benefit.
It seems counterintuitive until you realize that many permanent life insurance policies accumulate significant cash value over time. They are essentially massive, quiet savings accounts.
Oh, I see.
But here is the really insidious part. Traditional transaction monitoring completely misses these breaches because they are entirely silent.
Silent? What do you mean by silent?
So a criminal gains access to the online portal of the policy, but they don't immediately try to withdraw the cash. That would trigger an alert.
Right.
Instead, they might just change the contact email address. A week later, they update the physical mailing address. They are quietly taking over the administrative control of the account while the actual money just sits there.
Wow, just biding their time.
The newsletter points out that to catch this, institutions must use AI-driven behavioral signals long before a single dollar is ever moved.
Okay, so when you say behavioral signals, are we talking about, like, where they log in from?
It goes much deeper than that.
Oh.
Behavioral biometrics looks at the physical way a user interacts with the device. It looks at the cadence of their typing, the trajectory of their mouse movements, how they hold the phone.
Really?
Yeah, if a 75-year-old policyholder suddenly logs into the portal at 3:00 a.m. and is navigating through complex forms with the rapid-fire mouse precision of a 20-year-old gamer.
The AI flags that behavioral anomaly instantly.
Exactly, even if the password was correct.
Wow. It's analyzing the human behind the keyboard. And that brings us to the third area mentioned, which is easily the darkest application of this technology: human trafficking. The newsletter describes it as a multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise hiding in plain sight within the global financial system.
It is horrifying to think about, but again, it comes down to visibility. Trafficking networks generate massive amounts of illicit cash, and they leave distinct financial indicators when they try to move it.
Like what?
Well, the source material points to tactics like structured deposits. This is also known as smurfing.
Smurfing.
Yeah, it's basically breaking up large amounts of cash into smaller, repetitive deposits, specifically designed to stay just under the federal reporting thresholds.
Ah, clever but obvious if you can see the big picture.
Right. They also look for highly unusual account control patterns, like a single phone number managing the accounts of a dozen seemingly unrelated individuals.
Synthesizing all of this, it goes right back to Fang Yu's initial point about the ecosystem. You can't just build a thicker vault door at the bank. If you want to stop the money laundering, you have to protect the shopping marketplace. You have to monitor the mouse movements on the life insurance policy, and you have to look for the structured deposit anomalies of human trafficking.
And this is the breaking point. Human analysts are being asked to monitor a network that is too vast, too fast, and too complex for the human brain to process in real time.
Especially with regulators demanding ironclad documentation for every move they make. Which means they need a new kind of weapon. Enter the AI agent. With threats ranging from pig butchering to human trafficking, DataVisor just announced something called Vera.
Yes, Vera.
It is the first conversational AI assistant designed specifically to execute across the full fraud and AML lifecycle.
This is a massive operational shift.
Yeah.
Because previously, an analyst's day was a nightmare of tool switching. Right. They might get an alert on one dashboard, then they have to switch to a massive SQL database to pull the historical data.
Which takes forever.
Right. Then they use another tool to write a new detection rule, and a fourth sandbox environment to test if that rule actually works. Vera collapses all of that into a single interface.
The workflow they describe in the newsletter is just wild. It says, Vera allows teams to build rules, test optimizations, and investigate fraud alerts in one chat window.
And the numbers back it up.
They really do. The early results they published are staggering. A 2 to 3 times increase in detection coverage, a 40% reduction in false positives. Investigations are 20 to 30 times faster, and the preparation of suspicious activity reports, or SARs, is over 90% faster.
Chuck Subert, a fraud and AML practice director at Datos Insights, is actually quoted in the newsletter about this. He says that bringing conversational AI together with embedded execution agents puts more control directly in the hands of financial crime leaders.
So what does this all mean? I mean, does this mean humans are out of a job? Because letting an AI police the entire financial system on its own sounds like the exact compliance nightmare the FTC is warning about regarding algorithmic bias.
It does sound like that, but what's fascinating here is how the AI actually functions. Vera isn't replacing the human, it's an exoskeleton for the human mind.
Oh, I like that phrasing.
It translates natural language into complex data queries instantly. The analyst doesn't have to spend hours writing code to find a pattern. They just type, "Show me all accounts that share this specific device fingerprint," and made a transfer over $1,000 today.
And it just does it.
Vera does the heavy lifting of parsing millions of rows of raw banking data in seconds, allowing the human's critical thinking to operate at the actual speed of the fraud.
It strips away the data entry drudgery so the human can actually be a strategist.
Exactly. It empowers the institution to keep pace with those incredibly sophisticated, fast-moving criminal networks we talked about earlier.
It is an incredible landscape we've mapped out today. We started by looking at why a single legitimate-looking transaction is basically a lie, and how stepping back to look at the massive network exposed 94 coordinated fraud rings at a single credit union.
Yeah, that was huge.
We navigated the sheer scale of government intervention, from vice presidential task forces targeting benefits fraud to the FTC clamping down on the exact algorithms banks use to protect themselves.
We saw how the battlefield is expanding into low-friction online marketplaces and how defenders are using behavioral biometrics to catch silent takeovers of life insurance policies.
And finally, we saw how the defenders are fighting back, using AI agents like Vera to translate human intuition into instant, light-speed defenses. It really puts things in perspective.
It really does.
The next time you get that annoying text message asking if you actually tried to buy a coffee 3 states away, just remember the massive, invisible shadow war happening in the milliseconds behind that alert.
It is a constant, endlessly evolving arms race.
And that actually brings up a chilling thought. We've just seen how the institutions are deploying AI agents to instantly build, test, and optimize their defenses using natural language. But if these large language models are becoming this powerful and accessible,
The criminals are going to use them too.
exactly, how long until those massive transnational scam centers deploy their own AI agents? How long until they have an AI dynamically testing a bank's rules, finding the soft spots, and evading soft blocks in real time?
It's inevitable.
Are we rapidly entering an era where financial crime isn't a human trying to trick a bank, but simply one AI endlessly negotiating, deceiving, and warring with another AI in the dark?
Well, let's dive straight into the technology driving this.
Yeah.
Because the emergence of Anthropic Mythos is shifted from being passive to completely offensive.
And that's the crucial distinction right there, because previous AI models, even the really impressive ones from just a year or two ago, they were essentially just sophisticated pattern matchers.
Right. You prompt them, and they give you an answer.
Exactly. You prompt them, they generate text or code based on their training data. They were totally reactive. But Mythos is designed for multi-step agentic execution.
Meaning it acts like an independent agent.
Yes, it doesn't just respond to a prompt. It reasons through a problem. It formulates a long-term plan, and then it actually executes that plan over time. And if it runs into a roadblock, it just adjusts its tactics on the fly.
And Anthropic actually took this unprecedented step of engaging directly with major financial institutions to warn them about this specific capability.
They had to.
Yeah, because Mythos can autonomously identify system vulnerabilities. It can map out weak points and simulate attack paths before a human operator even spots a single anomaly on their dashboard. So is this like moving from a burglar testing your doorknob in the middle of the night to, I don't know, an invisible drone mapping out your entire house's security system, finding the one window with a malfunctioning motion sensor, and automatically picking the perfect lock before you even wake up?
That is a great way to visualize it, especially if we look at the mechanism of how traditional security actually works.
Okay, how so?
Well, the burglar testing the doorknob, they leave a trace, right? They rattle the handle. And the bank's older rules-based logic catches that rattle.
Because it knows what a rattle sounds like.
Exactly. The old systems were programmed to look for known bad behaviors. But your invisible drone, it isn't touching anything until it knows exactly how to get in. It might test a totally unrelated, like super low security API endpoint just to see how the bank's servers format their error messages.
And then it uses that information for the real attack.
Exactly. It uses that logic to exploit a completely different system. There's a brilliant observation in the source from Yinglian Ji, the CEO of DataVisor. She points out that new machine learning models are giving attackers the ability to learn and execute faster than most legacy fraud systems can even detect, let alone, actually investigate or respond.
Which means the window to prepare is essentially closing as we speak. I mean, the conversation has clearly moved from what if to what now.
It has to. You simply cannot fight an autonomous reasoning AI with a static checklist of rules. That's a losing battle. And that is why the industry is being forced into this massive pivot toward two new concepts: unsupervised AI and agentic defense.
Okay, break that down for me. Let's start with the first one. Unsupervised AI means it isn't trained on like a massive database of historical crimes.
Exactly. So supervised AI, the old method, it needs 10,000 examples of a forged check to know what a forged check looks like.
It needs to memorize the crime.
Right. It detects the known bads. But unsupervised AI doesn't need labeled data at all. It just looks at the entirety of a system's traffic. We're talking millions of data points, and it establishes a baseline for normal structural behavior.
Okay.
So when it spots an anomaly, it doesn't need to know what the specific crime is. It just knows, hey, this pattern is entirely new, it is highly coordinated, and structurally, this shouldn't be happening.
So it detects the unknown unknowns.
Spot on, yes.
And the agentic defense piece.
That is about fighting fire with fire. Agentic defense means having AI systems on the defensive side that can investigate and respond just as fast as the attacking AI evolves.
Okay, so matching their speed.
Exactly. In industry terms, they call it moving security left, catching the bad actors at the exact moment they try to onboard and create an account, rather than waiting for them to actually attempt a transaction.
Oh, I see. You have to lock the drone out before it even finishes scanning the house.
Yes, perfect analogy.
So if these AI attackers can act autonomously and systematically,
It is an adapt or die moment. The deployment of these defensive conversational AI agents is quite literally the only way institutions can simultaneously meet their crushing regulatory burdens and protect their customers from these hyper-fast threats.
and for you listening, this isn't just abstract technology operating in a server farm somewhere. These invisible, network-level battles dictate exactly how safe your money is. They dictate what kind of friction you will or won't experience the next time you try to make a transfer, buy a house, or open a new account. The walls protecting your money aren't made of bricks anymore. They are made of autonomous code.
It is a completely invisible war happening millions of times a second right beneath our fingertips.
Which leaves us with a pretty wild final thought to ponder. If autonomous AI systems are now constantly attacking, mapping vulnerabilities, and simulating breaches, while defensive AI systems are constantly optimizing, cross-referencing databases, and silently blocking them at speeds we can't possibly comprehend, at what point does human trust in the global financial system rely entirely on machines, simply trusting other machines? Something to think about the next time you tap your phone to pay for coffee. Until next time, stay curious. You've been listening to What the F Happened? Fraud and Financial Crime Deconstructed, a Defend podcast by DataVisor. If you want to keep learning between episodes, check out Defend Training, a set of self-paced online courses for fraud and financial crime professionals, practical and built around real-world scenarios.
And you can earn CPE credits through the ACFE San Francisco Bay Area chapter. You can find it at datavisor.com/defendtraining. The link's in the description.
This episode's audio was generated using Google's Notebook LM, based on expert analysis and trusted sources. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.